Let's begin, though, with new concerns about Canada's vaccine supply. The European Union is moving to give itself more power to clamp down on vaccine exports for the next 6 weeks. Officials there insist the move is not an export ban, but a way to ensure Europeans are vaccinated as soon as possible. Still, Canada does get most of its vaccines from the EU. Our other main source of vaccine doses is India, and it has reportedly halted shipments of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. A bit later in the show, we're going to ask the minister responsible for trade and exports what all of this means for Canada's supply. First, Dr. Carolyn Quach-Thanh, the chair of the National Advisory Committee on Immunization. She's in Montreal. Hi, Dr. Quach-Thanh. Good to see you again. Thank you for making the time.
Oh, you're welcome, Bessie.
I do appreciate it. I just wanted to start off. I know that, of course, you deal with the science, but there's a lot of speculation or concern tonight around the supply of the vaccines, just given some of the things going on in Europe and in India. I noticed some of the recommendations NACI makes are in the context of supply. So from your perspective, is it worrying? Are you worried at all that there is this uncertainty around exports from places we depend on to get those vaccines right now?
You know what? I'm not into rollout and I have no idea what supplies are looking like. But of course, we're always worried about doses of vaccines that might not come because our strategy is really based on trying to vaccinate as many people as possible, as rapidly as possible, to curtail the pandemic. Because if you don't stop transmission, then you risk of having variants emerge, and life will not go back to normal anytime soon. So yes, everything that has to do with supplies is concerning to us.
Let me ask you about something we do have some supply of right now in this country. That's AstraZeneca. Lots of headlines around that vaccine over the past few weeks in particular. I'm thinking specifically a few days ago of what came out of the United States with public health officials there raising a bit of a red flag, accusing the company of cherry picking their data to make it sound like the vaccine is more effective than it actually is. What is your impression of that?
Well, I mean, that's very unusual because usually when a company, puts out a press release, then it's because they've already spoken to their data safety monitoring board, so this external experts that look at the data. So it's just a bit, bizarre to have them come back to say, people, you haven't looked at the right data. So I haven't seen the data from AstraZeneca, this new trial. Nobody at NACI has. But again, we, as previously, we're not making any comments based on press releases, be it from companies or researchers. We really want to see the data with, all of it before we make a recommendation. So it's awkward, I have to give you that, but don't know what else to make of it until we see the actual data.
So let me separate the two then and ask, based on the data that you have seen, what is your recommendation on AstraZeneca? Because I know recently it changed, for example, even to say it was safe for older Canadians.
Right. So we haven't seen the data from this U.S. clinical trial that, the company was saying it was 76% efficacious or something of that magnitude. What we have seen, however, are the data from the other clinical trials, from the real world evidence, in particular 2 studies from Public Health England showing that in real life, the AstraZeneca vaccine was actually able to protect against hospitalization and death, the 65 and over, with a protection that is around 70 to 80%, which is similar to the effectiveness that is seen with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine used in real life. We have to realize that real life effectiveness always differs from clinical trials efficacy, because in clinical trials, you pick your participants. So you're going to make sure that, the immunocompromised are not there, the too old are not there, those with gazillion underlying medical conditions are not included. And so it's a much cleaner population, which gives you a very crisp estimate, which is real. But usually when you start doing effectiveness, so in real life where you vaccinate everybody who comes in for a vaccine, you see a decrease in that estimate, and that's expected. So, the 94% with Pfizer and Moderna, even if you see an 85% effectiveness when everybody is included, it means that it's actually pretty good vaccine.
And so will you be privy to at some point, will NACI be privy to at some point, the data that comes from the United States?
Yes, well, absolutely. I mean, these usually, the company will submit the data to Health Canada, at which point in time Health Canada shares the data with the NACI Secretariat. When the data are also made publicly available on the FDA website, we also pick them up there if the company hasn't submitted to Canada before. But yes, we will see the data in its entirety at one point in time.
Based on what you have seen, what you've read, kind of taking it all together for Canadians who are watching tonight, what is your best advice on AstraZeneca?
So at this point in time, for the elderly population, I think it's effective and it does protect against complications and death. What is left to investigate are these complications about clotting that we're seeing in Europe. And so NACI is currently looking at that to see is there anything to worry about it. The EMA said that looking at the risk and benefit of risk of disease if you don't get vaccinated versus risk of clotting associated with the vaccine, not necessarily causally associated, but associated, it's still more beneficial to vaccinate. We have to look at it in the context of Canada, and that's currently being discussed. So I think it's the only issue that still remains to be clarified. However, there's at least a minimum to say that if you are vaccinated with the AstraZeneca, and if the next 2 weeks you have chest pain, headaches, any symptoms that is out of the ordinary, to at least see your physician just in case. But at this point in time, that's where we're at. There's no decisions taken either from I don't think from Health Canada and either from our side.
And you said you were discussing it. Is there a timeline for when that discussion might end and advice will be produced?
Well, we hope that within the next week we'll be able to have a recommendation. And again, by the time we have a recommendation, the time it's translated, web coded, and the rest, it takes another 7 days because it has to follow a certain format to be on the Public Health Agency of Canada website.
Understood. I also wanted to touch base with you on dosing and the delay between the doses. And specifically, we talked to a few days ago, originally when that first press release came out, one of the developers of the AstraZeneca vaccine, Adrian Hill, who said that there is data to support, real life data to support a 3-month delay. But that it was, I just want to make sure I have the exact wording here. He said that the highest efficacy of the vaccine is 3 months for the second dose. He said stretching it out to 4 months is defensible, but safer to stick to the 3 months. I'm just wondering your thoughts on that. I know that, again, that recommendation was made in the context of supply, but as well, have you seen any data that supports 4 months to be specific?
So I think, that's when it becomes more complicated to explain, but I'll try to explain it anyway. What we said was up to 4 months, given the supply. We expect that gap to be dynamic. So eventually it will go back down. I think we all have to realize that pharmaceutical industries are not allowed to speak outside of what has been approved by the regulator. So Pfizer will say that we have to stick to the 3 weeks. Moderna will say to the 4 weeks. AstraZeneca will say to the 12 weeks, and it's fine. The way NACI has looked at it was to say, look, we know that up to 8 weeks and 10 weeks, we see a vaccine effectiveness in our population that is stable around 80%. We can't say anything more. However, we can't say what happens 2 months after the second dose either because we don't have that data yet. So, uncertainty for uncertainty, we had that data. On top of that, we also know that when you compare the scenarios, to be able to vaccinate more people with 1 dose, giving 80% effectiveness to a certain proportion of the population, will give you more health gains in terms of decrease in hospitalization and death at the Canadian level, which is not to say that is the best approach from an individual, but the individual is also protected by the collective protection. And so it's always this tension between, but I want to be protected fully now versus, okay, but if I don't take my second dose now, the community will benefit from it. And if the community benefits, then it means that there will be less transmission, less risk of complications and death at the population level. And I'm going to be protected by the fact that my neighbor is protected as well. So 80%, staggered around is going to be more helpful than a limited number of people who are going to be fully protected. And that's the thinking that led us to make that recommendation of up to 4 months. knowing that eventually it will be less. And knowing that, it may be there will need to be exceptions to that recommendation given the data that are emerging. And I've been getting a lot of emails and pressures personally to say, I don't know what I'm doing, and that, the data came out, why don't you change your recommendation? We can't change our recommendation based on one preprint article. We look at them, we follow them, and yes, we build it into our knowledge base. And yes, we are looking at it, and we will eventually change the recommendation if needs be. But it's not because a paper comes out today in the New England that tomorrow our recommendation is changed. It's not possible. That's not, we can't be that reactive. I don't think any advisory committee can be that reactive, because it would mean that every time something changes, you move the needle one way or the next. And then it just means that you're changing your recommendation every other day.
Right.
So you need to, gather that base of evidence before you change something.
I just want to make sure I'm clear and the viewers are. I think you're referring to something that came out around, for example, people with underlying conditions or people who have cancer. Is that what you mean? So, and my understanding is, and just if you could confirm, you're going to discuss it, you're going to review that, and then
absolutely,
it's sometime in the it might change.
And we might make a recommendation that differs for that group of people, but we can't just give you a recommendation before analyzing the body of evidence that is accumulating, understanding that the body of evidence changes every day.
Understood. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you, Doctor. Good to have you back on the program.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. The European Union is moving to give itself more power to clamp down on vaccine exports for the next 6 weeks. Officials there insist the move is not an export ban, simply a way to ensure Europeans are vaccinated as soon as possible. Right now, though Canada gets most of its vaccines from the EU, our other main source of doses is India, and it has reportedly halted vaccine shipments of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Mary Ng is the Minister of Small Business, Export Promotion and International Trade. She's with us from Toronto. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Always, Vashi. It's good to talk to Canadians and always nice to see you.
I'll start off with the EU and specifically the new measures they're looking at for the next 6 weeks. I know that you have said that you've been in contact with your counterpart. Has your counterpart specifically assured you Canada will not be targeted or impacted by this measure?
Well, Vashi, I think the one message I want to give to Canadians is that this is top priority. We are on top of it. We are working hard at it. My officials, all of us, myself, to the Prime Minister. Nothing is more important than getting vaccines into Canada, into the arms of Canadians. We're on track to get our 9.5 million by the end of March. We've already got 4.7 million, and we are going to continue working as hard as we can to make sure that those vaccines get to Canada uninterrupted. And I continue to be in touch with my counterparts at the EU, but also at the member states, to make sure that Canada's vaccines will get to this country uninterrupted.
And certainly I'm not trying to take away from your efforts, but my question is more specific. Have you received an assurance about this latest legislation from the EU? When is the last time, for example, you did receive an assurance that Canada would not be impacted?
We've continually been receiving assurances, and we continue to keep the pressure on and to keep working with our counterparts, my counterparts in the EU, to make sure that our vaccines come to Canada uninterrupted. We know how important this is. We know how important it is for families, for businesses all across the country. This is single most important top priority for the government, and we continue to work very hard to ensure that these vaccines will come to Canada and will get here uninterrupted.
And again, I'm not trying to take away from those continued efforts, but continuing to seek and get assurances is not the same thing as today being told by your counterpart in the EU, for example, that the new legislation they've introduced will not impact Canada. When is the last time someone in Europe told you that?
I've been in constant contact with my colleagues, and if the record is a demonstration of the hard work that has taken place and will continue to take place, we are absolutely on track to get 9.5 million vaccines by the end of March. We have secured contracts, as you know. My colleague Anita Anand has been talking about this. The vaccine supply that we have secured, and we continue to work to ensure that there is no disruption to that supply coming to Canada.
Pfizer, one of the companies, of course, that supplies us with vaccines that are made in Europe, says it's, quote, deeply concerned by the new legislation and it threatens the company's ability to manufacture in or export from the European Union. What should we take from that?
Well, my colleague, Minister Anand, is in regular contact with the companies like Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca and others. I continue to keep on top of this very, very important file to make sure that those vaccines that we have contracted do come to Canada and that they come here uninterrupted. And I'm very pleased to assure Canadians that we're absolutely on track to get the vaccines here into Canada. We're expecting 9.5 million by the end of March, and we're on track to do that.
With all due respect, Minister, though, you won't even tell us if somebody in Europe has assured you of that today or yesterday. I understand that the assurances were there previously. I completely take your point on that, and the supply was uninterrupted. It did slow down, but we still ended up getting what they said we would get by likely by the end of Q2. But this is a new piece of legislation, right? It introduces new principles, reciprocity, proportionality, which is all about, for example, how fast we're vaccinating compared to Europe. Right now, we're at only 1.5 doses or jabs, rather, per 100 residents behind Europe. So there are new things to consider, and I still can't get an answer on whether or not we've been told that we're safe.
I want Canadians to understand how important and what a top priority this file is. And I want to reassure Canadians in all of the work that we have been doing, that we have repeatedly been receiving assurances. There is no reason to believe that we will have a delay in these vaccine shipments. I continue to speak to my EU counterpart as well as my colleagues who are in the member states where the manufacturing takes place. I will keep doing that. I want to reassure Canadians that we are on track to get vaccines by the end of March, but also that all Canadians will be vaccinated who wish to by September. We are absolutely on track to do this, and we're going to keep working hard to make sure that our vaccine supply comes to Canada uninterrupted.
On India, let me ask you about that. That's the Serum Institute that sends us AstraZeneca vaccines. So far, they have sent and we have received 500,000 of them. There's still 1.5 million of them due, though. The 1 million doses were supposed to come in April and 500,000 in May. Reuters and the BBC both reporting that India has stopped exporting that vaccine because of an increasing need domestically. We reached out to the High Commission here, to government sources who are in Canada, and they're telling us that they themselves are seeking more clarity from the government in India. Have you received any clarity? Will those AstraZeneca doses be coming as scheduled?
Well, as I said earlier, making sure that Canadians get vaccines is our absolute top priority. We continue to reach out, myself, the foreign minister, and we have no reason to believe that we will have a delay in those shipments of vaccines coming to Canada. The Prime Minister said this earlier in the House, and we will keep working to make sure that our vaccine supply comes to Canada uninterrupted. I think that is the key message here for Canadians. I want to reassure Canadians how much of a priority this is. In fact, it is our top priority, and that we are all working very, very hard on this because we know how important it is for Canadians to get vaccinated. We're on track to do that, and we're going to keep working hard to make sure there is no delay.
Minister, once again, I'm certainly not trying to take away from the idea that this is your government's top priority. I think Canadians understand that completely. But you didn't answer there whether or not anyone, has anyone in the Indian government or at the Serum Institute assured you or your counterparts in cabinet that Canada's supply of AstraZeneca doses from India will come this way uninterrupted?
We continue to do this work, Vashi, and
that's not an answer with respect, Minister.
Well, I think our record so far in the work that we are doing and that we're committed to doing is such that our vaccines have been coming to Canada. We have received 4.7 million to date. We are expected to be on track for the end of March to get 9.5. Our officials have been in touch with their counterparts in India. We are going to keep doing this work to make sure that we experience no interruptions. We know how important it is for Canadians to get vaccinated, and we're working very, very hard to make sure that there is no interruptions.
I know in Europe those assurances were provided, and you're right, they came to fruition. In India, we haven't experienced this yet. So again, has there been a specific assurance provided yet? Yes or no?
We're going to keep working to make sure that vaccines come to Canada. There's no reason to believe that those vaccines from India will be delayed. The Prime Minister said this earlier in the House. We will continue to work hard at all levels with all of our allies. This is the work that I've been doing as the International Trade Minister, making sure that supply chains, particularly for critical essential goods like medicines, continue to flow. And this work continues every single day because it is absolutely our top priority in fighting COVID-19.
Do I interpret that as you have not yet received an assurance from India? I know you're working on trying to get one, but you haven't received one.
We're going to keep working to make sure that vaccines are not disrupted coming to Canada.
Okay, Minister, I'm out of time. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, as always. That's Mary Ng, Minister of Export, Promotion and International Trade. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.